Here's my take. You often hear that in these polarized times, Republicans and Democrats are deadlocked on almost everything. But the real scandal is what both sides agree on. The best example of this is the defense budget. Last week, the Democratic House, filled with radicals according to the Republicans, voted to appropriate $733 billion for 2020 defense spending. The Republicans are outraged because they, along with President Trump, want that number to be $750 billion. In other words, on the largest item of discretionary spending in the federal budget, accounting for more than half the total, Democrats and Republicans are divided by 2.3%. That is the cancerous consensus in Washington today. America's defense budget is out of control, lacking strategic coherence, utterly mismanaged, ruinously wasteful, and yet eternally expanding. $14,000 toilet seat covers and $1,300 cups, yes, cups, are par for the course. Last year, after a quarter century of resisting, the Pentagon finally subjected itself to an audit, which itself, in true Pentagon style, cost over $400 million. Most of its agencies, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, failed. The then Deputy Defense Secretary, Patrick Shanahan, admitted, "We never expected to pass." Donald Trump says he's a savvy businessman, yet his attitude towards the Pentagon is that of an indulgent parent. "We love and need our military and gave them everything and more," he tweeted proudly last year. Far from bringing defense spending into some rational system, he has simply opened the piggy bank, while at the same time trying to slash spending on almost every other government agency. The much deeper danger, however, is spotlighted by Jessica Tuckman Matthews in a superb essay in the New York Review of Books. Matthews points out that we think about defense budgets in a fundamentally erroneous way, tying it to overall GDP. But the defense budget should be related to the threats the country faces, not the size of its economy. If a country's GDP grows by 30%, she writes, it has no reason to spend 30% more on its military. To the contrary, unless threats worsen, you would expect that over time, defense spending as a percentage of a growing economy should decline. The United States faces a world in flux, to be sure, but surely not a more dangerous world than during the Cold War. It now spends more than the next 10 countries in the world put together, 6 of which are close allies like Britain and France. And the real threats of the future, cyber wars, space attacks, require different strategies and spending. And yet, Washington keeps spending billions and billions on aircraft carriers and tanks. In the case of the latter, Matthews points out, the Army tried to get Congress to stop spending on new ones. It has more than 6,000 tanks. No luck. There are even more fundamental questions about the structure of the Pentagon. Why do we have an Air Force if the Army, Navy, and Marines each has its own Air Force? Why does every service have its own representative to lobby for spending in Congress? Dwight Eisenhower was the kind of Republican who had a pragmatic skepticism about government. He was the kind of seasoned general who understood that peace came from a combination of military strength and diplomatic engagement. That was why in his farewell address, he spoke about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. 60 years later, it looks like one of the most prophetic warnings any president has ever made.